you had an op-ed in Al Jazeera recently, and it was titled something like Democrats, why the hell don't you listen to the working class? Like, you would be well served to listen to the working class. And you talk about your father. And I really love this piece. So can you just explain like how you see the Democrats have abandoned the working class, and given your own personal experience with your dad, who did vote Democrat and against Trump in now 3 elections?
Yeah. I mean, I think in some ways it's complicated, in other ways it's not complicated at all. I think the cultural issues and the economic issues are bleeding into each other, and they get mixed together in a really messy way. And that's some of what I tried to get at in the piece. So let me just give you an example. Trump's final campaign ad, as most folks know, in 2024, is this, vitriolic anti-trans ad. If you look at his closing ad in 2016, it's like one of the best ads in the history of the United States. It's really effective. It is populist. It uses the phrase "the political establishment" 6 times consistently. It's showing images of Wall Street and Hillary Clinton rubbing elbows with powerful, globalists. It's bullshit, but it's a powerful version of bottom versus top polarization, or populist rhetoric.
Yeah.
And his 2024 campaign, I think, was a really weak sauce version of 2016. It's got less of the economic villains and leaned much more into the culture war and the vitriolic stuff. But I think it's working because Democrats are just letting this vacuum exist, where Trump consistently names culprits, and they, his real trick in this is to the consistent culprit for Trump is this kind of cultural elite, right? And so this isn't the 1%. It's not the billionaires. It's not Wall Street. It's not the globalists, right? It's kind of roughly, depending on who you ask, the top 10%, the top 20% of the economic spectrum. It's people with educational privilege. It's the political classes contained in this. Trump's favorite villains are Hollywood, the media, academia, and Democratic politicians, right? And so this works because, it works because when you're in the bottom 80% and you look up at that cultural elite, it looks a lot like the top from your vantage point.
We have to mention the cultural elite also like have a lot of women and people of color in it. And so, I mean, they might be outliers writ large in terms of like who the working class is made up of, which are women of color, but like it is much easier to take aim at like the people who have, made it in some ways.
That's right. And that's part of the subtext of that final campaign ad in 2024 this year that's focusing on trans issues. The subtext is Kamala Harris and Democrats care more about this particular group of people, right, who you as a voter probably harbor some prejudice against. They care more about that group of people than they do about everyday hardworking people like you, right? That's part of the subtext. Another part of the subtext is these cultural elites. They think they know how to talk better than you. They think they know how to educate your children better than you do, right? So there's this anti-cultural elite message.
These teachers with their degrees.
Right.
Ooh.
Right.
You think you're smarter than me just because you know more?
Right. But it works also because economic power is abstract to people. It's like people are resigned to it, like the weather. And condescension has a human face. And the thing is, like, cultural elites are often condescending AF. Can I swear on this show?
Yes, you can.
Okay, great. Fantastic.
I mean, YouTube doesn't, Google doesn't like it, but I do, so nice. I win.
Right. But I mean, like, obviously, Basket of Deplorables is the classic example of this.
I wish it was a better dig. Like, don't you wish the Basket of Deplorables was just like, just kind of like a, a drawer of dildos. Like, I wish she would have said drawer of dildos, Like,
how dare you use metaphors and words I don't know? I think they were just offended they had to look in the dictionary for something.
Right, deplorable, and a basket. Like, when's the last time you've what kind of a basket? Like a wicker, like charmed little, craft.
Farmer's market.
Farmer's market basket. It's so elitist. The drawer of dildos, people I think can really identify with. Anyway, keep going.
No, but just to land the plane, like the thing that I try to connect in the issue is that or the Al Jazeera piece is that it's actually weak sauce. Trump's 2024 campaign was weaker than his 2016 campaign, but it's working because the Democrats are so committed to not disciplining any kind of a message about fighting for working class people. And whenever I say stuff like this, people are like, oh yeah, but like Kamala had all these great ads in Pennsylvania about raising the minimum wage, et cetera. That's true. There was some good stuff, right? They don't have an ounce of the message discipline that the Trump campaign has, right? And I'm not just talking about message, right? Because I think message, it all weaves together. But I'm also not just talking about policy. I think that there's a tendency on the left and among liberals to be like, wait, how does this populism stuff work at all? Because if you look at policy, Trump is antithetical and the Republicans are antithetical to the working class. That's all true, right?
Right.
But I think it's still fundamentally true. I think Michael Moore really got it right in 2016 in his description of Trump as a human Molotov cocktail that a lot of people who feel left behind by an economic system and a political system that's been rigged for the few against the many, they feel that they can throw that human Molotov cocktail into that system and blow it up. And when then Democrats are campaigning on defend democracy, it sounds like defend the status quo. Right?
Yes.
It's weak. And then every time the Democrats do something good, which honestly, Biden did a lot of really good things. Like Biden broke from neoliberalism in very important ways, right? But every time vocal Democrats try to fight it and defeat it, it creates this muddled message problem where people don't
or he walks away from it. He doesn't plant his flag on the victories that he did have, or he doesn't when he's, blocked from, sweeping student loan debt relief. Like, he doesn't, blame these whatever activist judges or like these, astroturfed organizations and court cases that are trying to undo it all. Like, and again, and I think we've talked about this before, many people have talked about it, not being able to squarely say it is corporate greed that is, causing all of us to suffer, and that needs to be reined in. I'm not afraid of naming that. And of course, Kamala Harris cozying up to things like even the crypto industry, and having these sort of like the opportunity economy, which is so like, if Biden was a break from neoliberalism, nothing sounds more neoliberal than saying opportunity economy in my book.
And I mean, the problem of inflation is huge right now. I mean, you talk to, this is in the piece too. My dad's just talking about like all the people he knows who are struggling to pay their rent. And, what Biden and Kamala and the Democrats had to do was to articulate that crisis. Like, have it be less about just the price of eggs and milk and more about these fundamental costs of childcare and housing and education that have taken people to the brink. That then when the price of groceries goes up on top of that, like people are past that point. And not just articulate the crisis in a way that resonates with people, but name the culprits, name the corporate price gouging, name the developers and the landlords and the big.
The thing is, she did, Jonathan. Like, that's the thing is, she totally did. The problem is, and I think this is like the sad truth, is that we didn't really believe her. Like, I don't think that people, I mean, there's many, many factors that it was the Democrats to lose. There's many factors. Biden should have gotten out of the race way earlier. But she talked about housing. She talked about corporate price gouging. She talked about the cost of childcare. She talked about all of these things, but we didn't believe. I think the majority of people did not believe her because again, without kind of a broad vision, without a fighting spirit, without the reason we don't have these things is because we keep on doing, like, we keep on giving subsidies to these same corporations that I'm allegedly trying to go after, that we're like, there's no seriousness there. And then you add, obviously, the Gaza, ridiculousness in terms of not listening to the base. But yeah.
And parading around the country with Liz Cheney and
100%. I want to ask you really specifically on the trans stuff and the cultural stuff that I think you're right to say are getting conflated because there's such easy distractions that the right is using. What do you think is the method to combat that? Do you think you, as I think Kamala Harris did, sort of like tried to not talk about the issues and sort of come with her own message? Or do you think you talk about it head on and put it in a framework that can neutralize some of the bite of these so-called cultural issues? What do you think?
I mean, first of all, some of this, the stuff that's gone around with, Matt Iglesias and the Pod Save people and whoever else of kind of like thinking that the Democratic Party has gone too woke. It's absolute bullshit, right? Like, one, like there are social movements raising issues. The article that kind of kicked this off, it named Sunrise Movement and Working Families Party. These are organizations that have pressured the Democratic Party to take popular positions on things like a Green New Deal, massive economic investment, reining in Wall Street, getting corporate money out of politics. Like, these are popular positions, and those organizations in particular, Sunrise Movement and Working Families Party, have only pushed the Democratic Party to take on popular economic positions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this piece, we just have to like put this to bed. This is bullshit. The Democratic Party tacked right on these issues. They didn't listen to a lot of these groups. I mean, especially on immigration and on Gaza, on foreign policy, right? And the second thing is, the Democratic Party is a broad coalition made up of a lot of groups that have particular grievances based on their identity as people of color, particular, Black people, Latino people, LGBTQ people, right? And they join into this coalition because they have a set of issues that are very important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's not a winning strategy to just say, hey, come to the table, but shut up about the thing you care the most about. That's not going to get us anywhere, right? That's a politician problem, to figure out how you are going to fight for the issues that are important to members of your coalition in a way that is popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not on the social movement groups and the outsider organizations to make it palatable electorally to you. That's on the Democratic Party, right? But they're not going to get somewhere by just throwing groups under the bus. That's not a winning strategy at all.
Or ignoring that they exist. I mean, that's it. I mean, we talked about this with Eric Andiola a couple weeks ago, that like, the fact that Democrats have done fuck all on immigration reform. It's like, at some point the Latino voters are going to abandon you, and they're going to be like, you know what? I'm just going to take my chances with deportations that hopefully aren't me. But maybe that'll, be easier on my pocketbook. I mean, it's so cynical, but it's true.
But the main point to your question, if Democrats were consistently vocal and visible, fighting for working people, taking on corporate greed, taking on Wall Street, naming powerful economic culprits that have rigged our economy and rigged our political system for the few against the many, those culprits are much, much, much more convincing than a kid who wants to play sports on the team that is not their birth gender, right? So fight for the things that people care about. And the other stuff, I'm not saying it, issues like there's a place to fight for these issues and to make unpopular positions popular by fighting for them, right? Like, don't just follow the polls, don't just throw people under the bus, but fight for these popular things that are there for the taking. Name the culprits that are popular culprits. A lot of people want to say the Democratic Party has a messaging problem. George Lakoff has written a book about this, Drew Weston, or multiple books, Drew Weston, about, Democrats are just worse at messaging. They have some important points about how Democrats try to argue with policy and rational arguments instead of gut level emotional stuff. Mm-hmm. That's true. But I think the much more fundamental thing is that the Democrats are refusing to choose whether the base that they're trying to mobilize is the multiracial working class base that is their historic source of power. You know, the New Deal coalition was a historic coalition in that it enfranchised huge swaths of working class voters, white working class voters who hadn't voted before, black working class voters. There are all sorts of problems with the New Deal coalition, but it enfranchised this multiracial working class political alignment that it's the historic strength of the Democratic Party. Is that the base you're trying to fight for?
Yeah.
Or is it the donor class? And their refusal to choose between those two bases is their, you know, quote unquote messaging problem. And they come off as inauthentic. And Trump, you know, for all his bullshit, and he's a con artist.
Yes.
He consistently has a narrative. I'm in your corner. I like you. People actually feel heard and seen by this guy. I think it's a con job, right? But he does it consistently.
Yeah.
I hate who you hate. That's the other part of it. Hate is
Yeah, it
a
is.
message. You're talking about all these economic policies. It's like getting people to eat vegetables. Yeah, you can actually tell them why this plan might work over the long period. Why things like what didn't Kamala run on? Not allowing corporations to buy single payer family homes.
Right.
I already said too many big words versus oh look, they let this trans girl play volleyball. What are you going to click on? Like,
right.
I'm sorry to be cynical, but
absolutely.
Well, that's, I mean, and that's the
Trump is a master of attention.
Yes. I mean, yeah, and the media assists with that. This is my big question going
Social
forward.
Social media assists with that. Jesus.
Oh yeah. 100%. My big question is about, you know, the Democrats. Are they salvageable? And because we see people like Jamie Raskin, who's like trying to be, be sort of the head on the House Judiciary Committee, which he feels like is going to be the front line against, you know, the worst instincts of MAGA, unseating Jerry Nadler. That's amazing. That's cool. We see, you know, the DNC chair fight coming up. Ben Winkler of Wisconsin, who is throwing his name in, and Wisconsin's done incredible things. They're looking at a supermajority soon. There are shifts and signs that maybe Democrats are willing to fight. Some of them are willing to fight. But then I just keep going back to, like, you know, the lesson of like Jesse Jackson. You know, when you talk about that multiracial working class New Deal coalition, Jesse Jackson tried to bring that back in the Rainbow Push coalition years. And Jesse Jackson was like the best hope, you know, just as Bernie Sanders, who actually voted for Jesse Jackson, campaigned with Jesse Jackson for him, was the best hope, you know. And time again, the Democratic corporate establishment ices their best hope out of the game because, that's again, right, they'd rather lose with money in their pocket than win on a more progressive agenda. And so my biggest thing is like, how do we keep investing in this party? And when do we actually when do we stop, you know? And I'm someone who believes in voting strategically, and I do believe in making change. I believe in inside outside strategy, but I am like, how many times can this happen to us before we're like, this is the fucking wrong vessel?
Yeah. So I think this is like a very tough question, right? And,
sure.
And so, like, first,
yeah, and I'm speaking nationally and very reductively, right? I'm not speaking locally, and yes.
Hey, it's a fair question. It's a question I've been asking myself more and more since this election. I mean, one way of understanding Trump's victory this year is, all other things being equal, what happens if one party over the course of a decade encourages grassroots movement, outside agitation, enthusiasm, involvement, and transformation of the party leadership, and another side fights it tooth and nail and defeats it over and over and over again and tells you got to vote this way anyway, right? What happens? This happens, right? It's fucking predictable, right? I mean, I've been predicting it since 2015. And it's so, but in answer to your question, like, do we give up on the Democratic Party? I mean, we have to take a very serious look as like, I think we have to step into being serious political people in this moment, and recognize that it's really up to everyday people to figure out how to fix this, because nobody's fixing it for us.
Yes.
And our two-party system is very, very hard to change. Like, it would take a constitutional convention. And if a constitutional convention happened right now, it would not go our way, right? It would be pretty bad. In my opinion, we're just not organized enough, right? There's not a magic solution to fixing this in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
And so at some point, does the Democratic Party, like, I've been somebody fighting for recruiting candidates who actually fight for working people, who refuse corporate PAC money. Those candidates have done better than Democratic, standard candidates.
Yep.
And then, come the general election, win or lose the primary, we try to rally people to go for, the shitty person who won the nomination.
Yeah.
And narrate the places that we've won, that we're on a trajectory.
Yeah.
Right. To changing this party. But the Democratic Party has made it harder and harder and harder. And AIPAC money and the Democratic Party's total silence and acquiescence to this mostly Republican donor money coming in and just sweeping primaries. It is shameful. It's disgusting. It disgusts people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they're making it harder and harder, and they're making it more and more likely that there could be a mass Dem exit. Mm-hmm. Which is a strategy that I don't think is a very well thought out strategy. But like, if it happens, it's the party establishment's fault. But
look at independent candidates.
And do.
Yeah. Sorry, say that again. I interrupted.
There's only so much people like pragmatic voters like you and me. I heard you talking about this in your recent interview. Like, we vote pragmatically, come the general election. We try to tell our friends to, but like, we're political insiders. We pay attention to this all the time. People are just disgusted and they're staying home.
Exactly.
And it's hard for me to muster the energy to tell them that they should do differently, honestly.
Yeah.
However, can I add one
Please.
Important thing to your question? I think that as long as we have a two-party system, what happens, the rare moments that third parties have gained momentum, they gain momentum and then one of the other parties collapses. So the idea of a new kind of maybe Labor Party, Worker Party coming and the Democratic Party falling apart, that's real hard to do. Is it possible? Maybe it is.
Why do Democrats have to fall apart first? Did the other team fall apart?
Yeah, exactly. No, and that's the question, though. I think, Matthew, to your point, is which vehicle is best suited to be not just a defense, but an offense against real American fascism. That's what we're talking about here. No one's talking about, so my own pet issue can get through. We're talking about a very comprehensive plan as we see the right set up, execute, and deliver their plan, whether it's on reproductive rights, whether it's on owning the courts now, whether it's on funneling money to the wealthy. So what the fuck is the plan from the other side? And so what's the best vehicle to do that? And like, is it the Democratic Party anymore? And so I think yes, it's both.
So I think,
because we have to remember, sorry, really quickly, that the Republican Party was on death's door.
That's right.
Until Donald Trump came along. So
this is their
lifeline.
That's a very important point. And I think we have to remember this. One thing we shouldn't do is abandon strategies that are actually working for us, but aren't working enough yet, right? This is not 10 years ago, right? We've strengthened the Congressional Progressive Caucus in many ways. We've built up the squad. We've had some setbacks, but like, this isn't the years where we just have like Dennis Kucinich holding a candle in the wind, right? Like, we've actually built up and not just the electeds, but a cohort of campaigners, volunteers, organizations that are cutting their teeth in important campaigns. And so we're building up this kind of tendency and this capacity to change the Democratic Party. And it's really important to recognize that the insurgencies in both parties, right? Now we just like put it all together, Tea Party, Trump, and the Republican Party. But that was an open insurgency that the leadership of the Republican Party fought tooth and nail to defeat, and they were defeated, right?
Yes.
And in that insurgency, they gained legitimacy with a lot of disaffected voters, right? And Trump still carries that.
Yes, he does.
Might be bullshit, right? But he carries, even as president, he carried this narrative of I'm an outsider fighting for people like you, right?
Yep.
It's not neatly symmetrical, but our insurgency, right? The Tea Party insurgency started in 2009. A couple of years later, they take out Eric Cantor. A few years later, Trump is the president, right? They have an 8-year head start. Where they are in 2009 is where we only arrived in 2017 with the squad, right? So the kind of insurgency in the Democratic Party is gaining steam. Is it gaining steam now? It's hard to say, right? The past cycle with APAC spending, it's really hard to know. But this is an aging party in terms of its leadership. There are openings. And I don't think we should just abandon this thing of taking over the Democratic Party. In fact, I think we should lean into this more. I think we need kind of like a new Occupy Wall Street kind of movement, or a Tea Party of the left. And honestly, I think it shouldn't play as nicely as what a lot of our organizations have played with the Democratic Party. To gain credibility, the fight with the party establishment has to be visible, vocal, and it has to punch. It has to like not be as nice. Honestly, it has to be not as nice as what Bernie Sanders was to Joe Biden in the primary.
Preach. You know, when I have to take my CBD gummies, or late at night when I stay up thinking about Bernie Sanders soft pedaling Joe Biden in the debate, and I get heart palpitations, and then I think, my God, if there's one thing, if I were Sanders, that I would regret for the rest of my goddamn life, it would be that, and not going harder at him. But I agree with you. I hear you. And I agree that, like, when you pull back the curtain on the Democratic Party, it's not a bunch of evil, conniving, Machiavellian corporatists who are like plotting against progressives. It's
there's a few of them, but yeah.
There's the Rahm Emanuels, but there's also fucking idiots. There's just idiots who don't know what they're doing. But what you just said about being less nice, about being less capitulative, and less, because they're so looking for opportunities to co-opt your movement, and yet they're not delivering for you. That doesn't mean you don't engage. It doesn't mean, but it's how you engage. So I do think that we're seeing the necessity for much more of an outside strategy whose goal isn't just to get close to power, but you write about power. So it's like, how do we build power, want to take power, but maintain that we don't want the kind of power that they're offering. You know, we don't want the kind of power that is about selling out big ass pieces of our, your agenda, like a single payer plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what comes up here is like, in my hierarchy of blame for this catastrophe that we're about to live through, first I blame like corporate power and neoliberalism and the Republican Party and Trump for like the strategy. But I actually don't spend a lot of time there because they're going to do that. That's like what they want to do. Right. But my next level of blame is the Democratic Party establishment for allowing this to happen for all the reasons that we talked about.
Sure.
Chiefly just refusing to consistently fight for working people and take on powerful interests, right, in a consistent, disciplined way. But then I think we have to be introspective, right? And, I've been part of a tendency that is trying to make the Democratic Party fight for working people. We've had some successes, but like we knew they weren't going to do this until we made them do it. And let's be real, we've failed so far to make them do it. There's a lot of reasons we could, excuses we could give. It's totally asymmetrical, right? Like we're trying to build something from scratch to change this. Like they have a lot more power than we do. But I do think ultimately it is incumbent upon us as outsiders, as people who care about this country, care about the future, care about, all the things we care about, right? Like we have to figure out how to do it. And one of the biggest reasons I think we haven't been able to is because we're suffering in the left, in like our organizations, nonprofits, organizations that I respect, that I've been part of. We're suffering from a version of the same thing that we accuse the Democratic Party of, which is being out of touch with working class people, right? The leadership of most of our organizations does reside in this top 10 to 20% of the economic spectrum. The chasm between the top 10 to 20% and the bottom 80% in our country, the cultural chasm, is severe.
Yeah.
And the would-be leaders, which Leaders of reform and revolutionary movements usually come from the educated classes. There are important exceptions, but they usually do. I might get grief for saying that, but people like Paulo Freire and Miles Horton talk about that all the time, right?
Sure.
It's like, it's a reality that people with educational privilege often lead those movements, but they have to be connected. They have to not have their whole existence be like, have this chasm between them and working class people.
Yeah.
And that's the case right now. And a lot of our movements are completely ineffective at reaching the bases that we really need to be mobilizing. And it's hard. It's not easy. It's really hard. I've been doing this in central Pennsylvania for the past decade, where I'm from. And I'm from a working class background who then like dove into this more educated class, right? But it's hard. It's not easy, but it's a real thing that we have to figure out, because until we do, we just come across as like the left.
Yeah.
This left versus right spectrum.
Yeah.
And
we have to start moving it to top versus bottom. It's not
Exactly.
about, it's really not about left anymore.
And it's hard to do that convincingly when we're not connected enough to a mass working class base.
100%. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.